what's up, gang? Welcome back to our second channel video. Today I'm here in San Francisco and I'm here to talk about the metro system, also known as Muni Metro, because it is one of the most interesting metro systems in the United States. First of all, because it's the third most used, and second of all, because it's one of the least reliable. Even though, as we see in this tunnel right here, it looks like it's a pretty reliable, pretty normal metro. The truth, if you actually look at the statistics, is this is one of the least punctual public transport methods you can find anywhere in the world. If you look at, for instance, the M line, it's at 35% accuracy, and it doesn't get much better from there for the highly punctual lines. Basically, more than half of these trains aren't on time, and there's a wide hatred of the system, the fares, and everything about it from the people who actually use the public transport here in San Francisco. Look how tiny they are. And when you combine that with just how small they are as physical units, when you combine that with an average speed of less than 10 miles an hour, no, I'm not joking you, the average speed of public transport here is less than 10 miles per hour, not much faster than walking. It's really confusing as to how any of this existed or does exist to this day, and it's actually quite an interesting story that I figured I'd explain with one of these things you didn't need to know about videos. Because you know what, I find public transport and I find metros to be hugely interesting, and maybe you do too, so join me for some things you didn't need to know about the San Francisco Muni Metro network, which, for the record, just to start things off, is barely even a metro network. It might look like it right here at this particular underground station. However, despite the fact that a few stations, like here at Van Ness and Barcadero, and a small tunnel in between are underground, the vast majority of the network, over 100 stations, are actually above ground at the street. This is called Muni Metro, but again, 90% of these stations are above ground, and not just above ground, are on the street. They are effectively trams that do happen to go underground, and admittedly, all of the trams do go underground at some point in this same tunnel, but still, it's a tram system that has a little bit of undergroundness to it. But even the underground stations on the Muni, like here at Van Ness for instance, have above ground stations with tram lines, tram rails, and even trams going past, although they're called heritage streetcars, they're not part of the Muni Metro network. But the fact that they have all of this kind of proves the point that these aren't really underground trains, they're trams that happen to go underground for a little bit. You might be curious therefore, like, so if it's a tram network that happens to go underground, and didn't go underground by the way until like 1960, what's the deal with that? And the simple answer is that yeah, there used to just be all tram lines that used to go out into the suburbs. They were built over 100 years ago as a way to expand San Francisco. It's a common story of lots of older neighborhoods. Back at the start of the last century, the US thought that the way to expand, the way to make cities bigger, was to have big streetcar lines going out into making new suburbs. This is how it's worked in England and London and in Japan and many other places for years. And this is when the idea of having railways of some form, or trolley buses like this right here, or some form of propelled transport to get people from these suburbs, places that couldn't access the city, into there, was a thing that was considered to be great. And this is why the San Francisco Railway Company, or the San Francisco Municipal Railway as it later became known, this is why these companies built rails in the ground, because they made huge new parts of the city accessible. All of the places along these lines, which you can see on screen, the current metro network, were places built by this railway company as a way to develop new land that previously wouldn't have been accessible. So yeah, these streetcar companies spent huge amounts of money to build these rail lines out of the suburbs with the promise that they could buy cheap land and make it much more useful and develop it into making it basically part of the city by connecting it with streetcars, which conveniently would look exactly like this. Fun fact, this is actually the heritage cars from those very early days, all those 100 years ago. They've been updated on the inside with clipper card readers, with all the modern stuff you might expect, but this is, the exact same ones, except now it's in real service. But yeah, this is what used to be going out to the suburbs, and for the most part, most American cities removed their streetcar rails in something you can look up if you want to. It's a whole complex thing, but the General Motors streetcar conspiracy. But basically, most cities removed their streetcar rails, but because these were through tunnels, they can be removed. So conveniently enough, even though all of San Francisco used to be streetcar based, all of them have to be removed, besides the tunnels, which now make up the Muni Metro network. But yeah, the only reason the current lines exist is because they were the only lines that required their own right-of-way, that had to use a streetcar and couldn't be replaced by a bus. Every single other streetcar line was replaced by a bus as part of the same General Motors conspiracy to, get motor buses to, replace electric-driven trams like these ones. But yeah, as a result of that, if you look at the K, the L, the M, and the J lines, they all use the Twin Peaks Tunnel. If you look at the N line, it uses the Sunset Tunnel. But all of these, things, they exist because they go through tunnels. Or in other words, the metro that's basically a streetcar started as a streetcar that happened to be the tiniest bit metro. And although it wasn't called a metro for much later, until the 1960s when BART came to town, they dug some tunnels. As a result of those tunnels, finally the Muni got to make that big underground section that made it kind of the the Muni Metro we know today. So yeah, there is a metro system in San Francisco that started as a streetcar system that was slightly underground, but is now an underground system that is mostly a streetcar, or a tram as it's known in every every other country besides Canada and America. But still, yeah, that's a very interesting thing to me, that it started as, you know, one thing that was barely another thing, and now it's one thing that is mostly the other thing. But yeah, branding and systems, people see it as a metro, despite the fact that it is mostly a streetcar slash tram system. But yeah, let's talk about some fun facts about it, shall we? So yeah, that means, fun fact, there's only really one real metro line on the Muni, you know, metro system, and that one metro line is actually the T, which, fun fact, by coincidence, is coming behind me. There is only the T line, which is actually designated to be a real kind of metro line, and even then, it's mostly above ground. Well, at least the above ground, you know, stations are these kind of bay platforms. They are separated from traffic, and at least it has priority over pedestrians, because, fun fact, just to test this one and prove this point, earlier we tried to walk in front of a tram, and, you know, the tram had to stop for us. That's not how metros and trams can work. They've got to be faster and better than cars and people. But no, most of the other lines actually, you know, they don't take priority over cars. This line, again, the lights change for them, there's the bay platforms. It's the only real line on the Muni Metro as a result, and therefore, even though it seems like it's a 6-line system, all of the other lines, the J, the K, the M, the N, and the L, all of those lines together, they really are kind of not real lines, whereas this is the only one that was built to be that. But in spite of that fact, it's not actually the most used of any of them. Again, it only connects a really niche part of East San Francisco up to the main center, because again, there's real connectivity problems with the way San Francisco is organized, which leads us to the next fun fact, actually, which is the fact that, yeah, unlike most metro systems, which are organized by like northbound, southbound, etc., because of the weird geography of San Francisco, and because of the weird geography of this metro line you're seeing right now, it means that every single line, instead of advertising itself as going north, south, east, west, etc., etc., they advertise as going inbound and outbound. Are they going towards downtown San Francisco, which is the big underground corridor from earlier, or are they going outbound towards the suburbs? That is the way every single line works, which means right now, a train that should be, there's no train coming, but if we were going to catch one this way, it'd be going outbound towards wherever the T goes, and if we catch a train this way, it's going inbound towards the center, and then from there, wherever else it wants to go. So, fun fact, inbound and outbound instead of northbound, southbound, only on the Muni, as far as I know. And by the way, because this is San Francisco, at this random just T station stop I used to prove this point, just behind me there is Google of San Francisco. The crazy thing about being here is every single tech company you interact with all the time, I just found at random stations. So Uber and Dropbox and, you know, you just, Twitter for instance, I've just found them while walking around the city. So this isn't necessarily a fact about the trains, but it is a fact about the city that I find it. Let's get on. So another fun fact about the Muni Metro is it's one of the metro systems in the world which is trying to increase capacity, not by making larger trains or anything like that, because every single line uses the same train layout and they're all pretty small like we mentioned before, but instead they increase capacity by changing the seating layout to make it all horizontally seating, kind of like the London Underground. So as you can see, the seats are all like this. There's no butt grips or anything like that, you just kind of slide as you go along. And then even worse than that, they have these over here, just like rails you lean a bit up against. Not as nice as sitting, but it does get more people here in the peak hours, like standing up or whatever. And it's one of those interesting debates that every metro system has to have, is like, should you have more seats to cater for more people more of the time, or should you try and get more capacity during the rush hour, where people have to be standing right next to each other, you know, this close woods. So instead the question is, would you rather have more place to stand? And I don't know if there's a good answer to this one, but the Muni's answer is to have as little sitting space as possible to facilitate as many people standing with the rails like this. I am swinging back and forth quite wildly here. But yeah, fun fact about the Muni. It is kind of sad when you see the size of these platforms and the size they clearly had intended at some point for these trains to potentially be, and then you see the size of the trams that actually end up coming along them. Very sad, very depressing by comparison. That means that there are buses like this one over here, or, you know, bendy buses. They're actually longer than the tram lines, or the metro lines as they're meant to be called themselves. Also louder. So my next fun fact brings me here to Dolores Park, which not only has an amazing view of San Francisco. I feel like this video is accidentally getting a lot of good views of San Francisco, but also is a great opportunity to explain how exactly, you know, the trams work and how they're slightly different to normal trams. And that is the fact that sometimes, again, the ones that remained, they have exclusive right-of-ways in really interesting places. So first of all, this one goes right through a park. This is one of the fairly major parks in Mission District Gishgers. So there's just like trams going through the middle of the park over there, random tram. Oh. And then, as you can see, you know, more park over here. Kind of interesting by itself, but also interesting that if you look over there, where there is currently another J train coming from, you can see how there is like this little curve where only trams are allowed. There's no cars, no people, no bikes, nothing but trams. And if it, by itself, when you see it, on the street, it doesn't look like anything too significant. It looks like it's going to be a tunnel maybe or something like that. But it's one of these examples of, because these trains were built before anything else for the most part in SF, you can see how on Google Maps, again, to bring this channel back to its original focus, if you look on Google Maps, you can see how there's just houses missing in an S shape where there should be a train. It's super interesting to see, and there's a billion examples of this. For instance, by the M line, it goes through some, just like, again, random alleyways, cutting through some stuff. All of the, the lines which were important enough to turn into Muni metro lines like this one, all of them have one of these weird kind of cut-throughs where it goes right through some residential houses, and I find that to be super interesting. So a lot of streetcar slash tram systems around the world have to deal with the problem of working out whether they have flat and raised, cars themselves, or whether they have stairs. Some systems, like the Muni, have both, where it transforms. That was fun. This is pretty cool because it means it can do both the internal kind of metro sections, but also it can do the outer-lying streets where you literally just board straight onto a random part of the street, like right now, as you can see, just right on to the street. Kind of cool in my opinion. This random stop on the street, by the way, is on the N line, which for the record has some of the most frequent stops of any metro or tram line I've seen anywhere around the world. It's literally 1 or 2 streets between a lot of them sometimes. I'll show you, even on Google Maps, you can see how there's like stop, 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 way more frequently than you'd ever expect. Stop there. Stop there. But also quite interestingly about this N line we're on right now is it's the most used of the Muni metro lines, with around 40,000 people using it every single day, which is actually surprisingly low for a public transit system in a major city like San Francisco, given it's the 3rd biggest one in the United States, but still kind of high, I guess. So yeah, the N line is the most used, but still isn't really hugely used, and most of the N tracks, as you can see right here, look like this. They're just lined into the street, because that's what the majority of this system is. The majority of the Muni metro, despite the good branding, and despite the way it might look to any foreign travelers, or even people who move here for the very first time, it might look like an actual metro system that has, solid streetcars, trams, whatever you want to call them, metro cars even to some extent. But in reality what it is it's a bad system that was inherited that doesn't really function too greatly. Again, the on-time statistics, I want to come back to this one and kind of rag on it, because I find it so interesting that they've always been known for non-punctuality, but it's just kind of gotten worse and worse over time, and the kind of the systems put in place to fix it kind of, to me, espouse the kind of problem that you see with the super ultra-liberal cities, where the values of the things that people want, the things they'll vote for, are like, yeah, we want this. There's lots of different things, like we want public transport to be good. There was even there's actually I find this hilarious, there was a referendum, a proposition on should the Muni have a punctuality target of 85%. The voters wanted the punctuality, but did it get punctual? It did not. No, things are still hilariously late all the time. With even the most used lines, the N again, just to mention it, even the most used line is still less than half, percent accurate, because the voters want the thing, they vote for people to make the thing, but it's not, particularly enforced. There's no, like opposition held to account. There's no, real thing, because there's so many different groups that are trying to be looked after that none of them are being looked after so great. I guess a good way to describe this would be like, the NIMBYism, no, my backmardism, but on an extreme scale, on a city-wide scale, where people want good public transport, but also, why should cars be disadvantaged? Why should people not be able to cross in front of the tram, which I think has literally happened right here, which is ridiculous in my opinion. These things happen all the time, but it's a lot of overlapping interests. We can find stories just to show on screen about, like, there's a historic laundromat that can't be doesn't want to be closed, like historic laundromat, whatever that means, won't be closed, and therefore one of the Muni lines has to move around it. Or another ridiculous example is there's a this sounds too fake to be true. A guy wants to turn his car wash to have like a little whale face on it. The city council says no, actually that isn't in the theme far area. The extreme level that, when people, want good values and progress, to have progress, you need to have some amount of deciding, groups over things. But when you have ultra cities this far in one direction, you don't get that, because everyone is, vying within the same interest rather than having competing interests of any form. So yeah, it's like a very bizarre system where people want things, they vote for the things, and then the things don't happen because there's no accountability to making it happen, which is a sad thing that you see when you get one-party politics in places like this. But anyway, yeah, that's just my take on these things. If you have a more in-depth thing down below, leave it in the comments down below. There's a lot of interesting things about how this railway came to be. The fact that it escaped the streetcar conspiracy, not because they wanted to, not because they wanted public transport, but just because accidentally they had to keep going because of the way they dug the tunnels. The stuff with, like, the fact that they only have an underground section because the BART came through and dug a tunnel that's double-decker, so the Muni runs just above where the BART actually runs. They wouldn't have any underground if it weren't for an entirely separate underground system that exists in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's a hugely interesting system that I hope you all enjoyed learning about in this video. Because it's dark now, I need to go and get back to sleep. And actually, this is my last day in San Francisco. It's been fun. I like the city a lot in lots of ways, and I'm concerned in lots of ways. So yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. And I don't know, if you have any San Francisco thoughts, leave them down below. Look, I'm walking across the street. It's fine because the trams will stop for me. I guess that's nice for everyone but the people on the tram. Anyway, goodbye. Which now make up the Muni Metro network. Sit down.
Yeah, you did well, man.
This is... Yeah, sure, keep going.
Okay.
He gave you something to get. He was speeding. Speeding on the highway.
San Francisco's fun.